That's how we left off yesterday, where she lived upstairs. You were one big, happy, extended family.
Yeah, well, we used to talk up and down the dumbwaiter.
Oh, that's good. Now, was she was married at the time, or no?
No, she wasn't married.
Okay.
No.
So she didn't meet Al until later on?
Well, she knew Al. Al worked in the store. Al was the floor manager.
At what store?
At Stearns
Oh,
Department
it's
Store.
in Manhattan?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's where
Just
Jean
off
worked?
Fifth Avenue. Yeah, Jean was a buyer
I see.
in Stearns.
Okay.
She was the only Christian buyer in the dress garment.
Oh, in the garment industry,
In
it's all
the
very,
garment.
very Jewish.
Yes, she was the Shane
Dominated.
Shipseth.
I see.
Pretty little Christian.
Oh, I bet you
That's
they
what
loved. I bet you they loved her.
Oh,
I'm
they
sure they
did
did
love
love her.
They did.
I'm
In fact,
sure.
she called one of the manufacturers years later when Betty opened a children's store in Palo Alto, and Jean called one of the manufacturers. And she had to be out of the garment district at least 15 years, and he knew her right
Oh, he
away.
knew her. Isn't that funny?
And helped her.
Oh, isn't that
And,
nice?
put it, because even though she was in dresses,
Mm-hmm.
he put her in contact with different suppliers for children's clothes.
I see. Okay. All right, so about that time you probably were outgrowing your apartment and you needed to buy a house, correct?
Yes.
So what year did you buy our house
We
in
bought
Stone?
the house in 1950.
1950.
Yes.
Okay.
We bought the house. Your father went on strike July 1st. And we had already signed everything for the house. And we didn't go back. We moved into the house on September 10th. And your father went back to work September 12th. We were rather broke.
Mm-hmm. And wasn't there a hurricane that year that damaged
Yes.
the roof?
We moved into the house in September, and the day after Thanksgiving that year, 1950, there was a hurricane and blew part of our roof off. Of course, the insurance company would not pay for a new roof. They would only pay for part of a roof.
Only pay for
And then,
repairs?
as more roof blew off, they'd pay for that, and they'd pay for that. They wouldn't pay for the whole roof.
Oh,
Although the whole roof was loose.
I see.
I mean, it'd been on since the house was built in I think the house was built in 1927,
Mm-hmm.
28, in around there.
So it was a
somewhere.
relatively new house when you bought it. It wasn't that old, like 20 years.
Well,
Yeah.
1927 to 1950.
Yeah, it wasn't that old.
But the roof was not too good.
Okay. And then at the time, it was a two-family house, and you bought the house and you had a tenant living
Yes,
upstairs.
Mrs.
correct?
Birmingham.
Mrs. Birmingham. How long did she live there for?
Mrs. Birmingham, and also her sister, Mrs. Gibson, and Billy Gibson,
Okay.
the son.
Mm-hmm.
They lived upstairs. And the Gibsons moved out after a couple of years. The Gibsons moved out
Mm-hmm.
and left just Mrs. Birmingham up there. And Mrs. Birmingham moved out when you were a baby.
Oh, so she was there for 10 years, or
Yes,
7 years?
7 years.
Mm-hmm. Now she moved out because she got too old?
Well, no, she had relatives in Brooklyn, and there was like a high-rise kind of an apartment,
Mm-hmm.
and she had no children,
Mm-hmm.
but she had nieces and nephews.
Oh, okay.
And so she had one niece that she was very close with, so she moved into this apartment.
Oh, to be closer to her family?
Yes.
Okay.
Right,
And you made the decision not to rent out.
right.
You were just expanding too much.
Yes, we were expanding much too much.
Mm-hmm. So you
So-
needed that upstairs flat. So for that first 10 years, you lived just on the downstairs?
Yes, and it was crowded.
I'm sure it was.
Because Uncle Bill came back, too.
No. Oh, so Uncle Bill lived there too? Holy mackerel.
Part of that time, yes.
So by the time I was born, you had, well, obviously, you had 7 kids.
Right.
You guys and
No.
Uncle Bill all on that ground
Well,
floor?
no, Uncle Bill, we made arrangements with Mrs. Birmingham.
That he would be in that
Uncle Bill
upper,
could
in his little
have
room.
that. They used to rent out that upper room anyway.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah, because it had its own separate entrance.
Yes,
Yeah.
they could go just out the door.
Yep.
They rented that to a nurse. Before, I think Mrs. Birmingham lived there first. Then, when her husband died and Mrs. Gibson's husband died,
Mhm.
they moved in. But before that, they used to rent out that room to a nurse from Staten Island Hospital. They could always find a nurse in Staten Island Hospital who needed a room.
I'm sure what a perfect commute for them too.
Right, but that's when your father and I slept in the front room. Where-
Oh, the little sunroom where we
The
used to
sunroom.
put the Christmas tree. That was your bedroom, kind of
Mhm.
small.
Mhm,
And
very
then I
small.
guess the living, and then you had the 2 rooms for the kids off the kitchen.
Right.
And then you had the living room and dining room, which I'm sure were sort of a nursery.
Well, no, we used the dining room, for changing tables
Right.
and stuff like that. But we used to have the bunk beds and a crib in one room.
Oh, I see. All right. So you got
see.
like 3 of them in there.
Yeah, 3 of them in there.
Maybe another 3 in the other one, and then you had the newborn, whoever the
The
newborn was.
newborn was in with us.
Right,
Yes.
that year.
So when Mrs. Birmingham said she was going to move, we were thinking of asking her to move, but she was such a sweet old lady.
Now, how old was she when she finally moved?
Oh, she was in her 80s.
Oh, she
or
was.
low
Yeah, so you were
80s.
probably
Her
very
mother
reluctant.
was in her 90s. Her sister was in her 90s.
You were reluctant to ask her to
Oh,
leave.
yes, and she had lived there since the house was built.
Oh, she had.
She was
Oh.
the
Now,
only
who were the
tenant.
previous owners?
The Petersons.
The Petersons. And they had built the house?
They had built the house. And the people next door were the Garbers.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know how close that porch was. Do you
Yes.
remember when there was a porch on Sammy Gatto's house?
Yes.
The porch was so close. The Garbers, I think, put that porch on, thinking no one would build.
Would build there. Mm-hmm.
And then the Petersons built the house practically on the property line.
Right,
Because those lots were only 50 by 100.
right.
So, the house took up most of
Most of that space.
Most
sure,
of
you
that
didn't have much of
space.
a yard.
So, and then the Garbers lived there, and they lived there for 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sold to
The
Gattos.
Sammy, the Gattos,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah, and the
Um,
Gattos sold to John and Tootsie. No, they sold
No,
to
you John and Tootsie, and then John and Tootsie sold to the
Yeah, they
Gattos.
sold to John and Tootsie.
There you go.
And then the Gattos moved in.
Now, at this point, you were still visiting Aunt Mildred, correct? I guess not very often because you had all those kids.
Oh, well, no, we went up first to Boone's. Well, yeah, your father and I went up when Mike was little, and Gloria McSorley took care of Mike.
Mm-hmm.
He
Oh,
was
and you
a
guys
little
went up on
baby.
like a little vacation?
Yes, we went up on a little vacation.
Did you drive up or take
Yes,
a train?
we
You
drove up. Yeah, we drove up. We had I forget what car we had then. I know we had the Black Beauty. That was the first car we had, and the transmission used to fall out of it all the time. That wasn't a very durable car. I forget what the second car we had. But we never had a new car. We always had a new old car.
Mm-hmm.
And then we bought a blue, what is the, on All in the Family, a La Salle. She always sings our old La Salle ran
All right,
fine.
our old
It
La
was-
Salle
It was
ran
big,
fine.
it looked like a gangster's car.
Mm-hmm.
We had that. And then we bought another one from Uncle Jim Anderson. It was an Oldsmobile. Gray Oldsmobile. We
Mhm.
had that. But we went up when Ellen was a baby. It was the first time we went up to Boone's.
So Mrs. Boone knew Aunt Mildred, correct? Or Aunt Mildred knew
Mrs. Boone took care of Betty when Betty had children. She came in and took over that. That's Mrs. Boone used to do that.
Oh, I see. She came in
would
and take
come
over
in,
her house.
Take over the house.
Mm-hmm.
And cook and do everything
Mm-hmm.
until the mother came home. Because the mothers used to stay in the hospital 10 days, a week to 10 days
Mhm.
then. And then she'd stay for a while afterward.
Oh, I see.
And she did that. And that's where Aunt Mildred met Mrs. Boone.
And found out that they had a
Betty's.
house that they
Yes.
rented.
And then she found out that it was out in the country, but there was a nurse who lived within walking distance, would be Mrs. A.
Mm-hmm.
So that it would be a good place to take children.
Also, we should mention that to Mrs. Arnold when we see
Yeah.
her. So she played a role in your decision
Well,
to
it was
start
nice
coming there
to know
with all those kids.
when you were out. Well, we didn't have too many then.
But it was it
Because when
wasn't.
we went up, it was just Mike, Karen, and Beth, and J.R.
That's a lot of kids.
Ellen was a little baby, and Grandma Dempsey took care of Ellen. In fact, I think Ellen went to Carbondale. They took her to Carbondale.
Oh.
Ellen went to Carbondale, and we had 4 kids. But then after that, we went up every year. We went up 2 weeks.
Right, that's when you started. Did you stay anywhere before you stayed at the Boones, or was the Boones the first place?
The first place we stayed
rented.
with kids. Yeah,
Okay.
I stayed with Aunt Mildred. Other
Right.
times we went up, I stayed with Aunt Mildred.
So you first started going up for 2 weeks, then you quickly realized.
Once 2 weeks was enough. I said no. If you can't go up for a month, then we won't.
And you wound up going up there from like the mid-50s into like the early 70s, I think is when you stopped.
Yes. Well, Daddy and I, on several occasions, Ed Boone would call and say that the leaves were, when the leaves were at their prime. So Daddy and I a couple of times went up for a long weekend.
I seem to remember
But
that.
that's all you kids were grown.
Yes, and you
All
could
you kids
leave
were
us.
grown.
I think we have some pictures
Most of you kids, some of you kids were away at college. And of course, Uncle Bill was home then.
Right.
He was there.
Yes.
So he had no problem.
Just
So-
take it off.
Yeah.
Well, that must have been very nice.
Yes, it was.
Nice little getaway
It
for
was,
you.
and it was a wonderful place to go. And it was $50 a month.
See, I always thought it was 200. Did it go up to 200 over the years, or
No, went up to 60.
$60 for the whole month?
Not a month. Not
A week.
A week.
All right.
Pardon me, a week.
Oh, okay. So it started off at
$50.
$200 for the month,
Right.
and then it got up to the incredible price of $240.
Well, that's when he bought the camp down at the
Oh,
at
at
the
the
river.
Okay, and you could
Then it
use
went
the
up.
camp.
Yeah, then it went up $10.
Oh, I see.
And
Well,
of course, we had all the babysitting you could possibly have.
Mm-hmm.
We had Mrs. Boone making us go into town to dinner and a movie and stuff like that. So she was always anxious to take care of the kids.
Yes, I remember her, or both of them taking care of us.
Oh, yeah. Well, Daddy and I, we didn't take advantage of them, you know.
Oh, no, you want to be
In the time
careful.
we were up there, if we went in twice.
Once or twice.
To the Blue Gentian.
Sure.
Because your father, yeah, of course, as you well know, your father liked to eat well.
Mhm.
The Blue Gentian was, it looked like a little tea shoppy, but boy, the food was wonderful.
Mhm.
Big helping.
Yeah.
Big helping.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful place for children. A wonderful place for children. And the Boones didn't mind children. They loved children. Remember how you kids used to go off and because they had a television there, but it didn't work.
No.
There was no telephone.
Mm-hmm.
My radio, all I got was static.
That's true. You never had a phone there, did you?
No.
No.
It was always over. It
Right.
never, and the television didn't work. It was sitting there, but it
Mhm.
never worked. So you kids would all go over and watch television with Mr. Boone.
Yeah, and he always liked that. We'd
He
make
liked
his
making
popcorn
his
and
popcorn.
mhm. And he had his 3 stations. But no, I remember that's where we were when Nixon resigned.
Well,
I'm pretty
when
sure.
they landed on the moon.
Or when they landed on the moon, that's true. But Nixon, didn't he also resign in the summer?
I don't remember. I
Thought
know
he
we were
did.
there when Marilyn Monroe.
But you're right, when they landed on the moon, we were there. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, I don't remember whether we were there.
Or maybe
when
he was
Nixon-
impeached. I can
Yeah,
remember
maybe.